Sheena Harris. She's a professor of history at Tuskegee University in Alabama. Sheena, thanks so much for joining us. These monuments, are they art? Are they history? Are they more than that?
I think that they are a number of things. However, I think when we're talking about the displaying and the continuing displaying of these monuments of Confederate soldiers as a way of preserving history, I think that we've seen throughout history that history can be preserved in other ways that are not triggering to the ancestors of those who were enslaved here in America.
We've seen some monuments removed legally, some torn down unlawfully. Where do you draw the line, and ultimately who gets to decide what stays up and what comes down?
I do think that there should be agitation around it. I do think that if there is not agitation in terms of what the statues represent holistically, that nothing is going to happen, as we've seen throughout our history. And I think that with that, that they should be removed, and that they should be, if they're going to be placed somewhere else, but saying that they should simply stay up because they are a part of our historical past really brings a lot of Americans a highbrow, if you will, as to what part of American past are we not only attempting to preserve, but what part of American past are we willing to not reckon with and reckon with what it means, and that we're not willing to say, okay, this is a traumatic past that we're not attempting to do on this public display where taxpayers have to actually pay for it.
Donald Trump suggested in his Mount Rushmore speech a national park for statues of American leaders. We saw something similar post-Soviet Union. Do you think this could be a solution? Could these controversial statues go there, for example?
I think that that is a plausible solution. And I think that even coming to the table to discuss what these statues mean, I think it's always so interesting when the argument is that it is American history and that this is the way that we preserve American history. But that same argument does not allow us to reckon with some of those darker parts of American history and how those things still trigger those emotions. And so if the middle ground is that we are going to remove all of these statues, especially the ones that are paid for with American taxpayer dollars, to a park, then I think that that is something that should be brought to the table. But for the simple fact that it usually is not brought to the table and that it's said that we are not going to remove them for the historical past, I think that becomes very problematic.
The state of Mississippi just voted to remake its flag without the Confederate symbol in it. I couldn't help but think, reminded 5 years ago when South Carolina removed the Confederate flag from its state capitol house. That followed a massacre at a black church there. Why is it that it always seems tragedy prompts action? Is this also sort of too little, too late as a gesture?
I think that one thing that we also see throughout American history is that always happens, is that there always is going to be this very late response to anger or very late response to injustices. And because of those late responses, it usually does incite some type of protest around it. And so I think that we're going to see a lot more of these, especially with the rise of protests that we're seeing with Black Lives Matter. So a number of voices that have been silenced, we're really are creating this platform to be able to hear them.
Sheena, finally, for people who might not get it, for the naysayers out there, the significance of these statues, of their removal, how important is it, do you think, for the Black American community?
It's beyond important. And I think that it's important to remove those physical things within our history, but it's also important to start these conversations and to start them where they're a part of the larger narrative. And so that it doesn't become these separate narratives of American history and Black history, but that it's one narrative that respects all of the Americans. And I do believe that we can come to that place.